everyone. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Where You're Planted podcast. It's me, your host, Deborah, and I'm super stoked and excited to be here recording another episode of the podcast. If you can hear any background noise, water trickling down a pipe, the sounds of birds singing, the sounds of cars driving by, I apologize. I have my balcony door open because it's that time of the year where it's a little bit warmer. It's getting a little bit warmer, and so I need to. It's getting a little bit warmer, and so my apartment gets a bit stuffy and hot if the balcony door is open. So I need to let some fresh air in, and the trade-off is we get a lot of background sounds. Hopefully, that's something that I can fix in post-production, but if I can't, I'm just apologizing in advance. But yeah, speaking of, it is the month of April. I'm coming at y'all a little bit later than I thought I was going to with this episode. It should have gone up a few days ago, for which I apologize. Life just be lifing sometimes, and I'm still determined to do 2 episodes this month. So there'll be this episode, and then there'll be another episode later in the month of April. So I'm gonna keep that promise to myself and to you guys as well. On today's episode, though, I wanted to talk about something a little bit, I think, kind of interesting to sort of ponder and grapple with. So sometimes I feel like some of us, or maybe a lot of us, just feel the need to blow up our lives in dramatic and maybe not so dramatic ways. It could be like something like quitting your job or just moving away. And sometimes I fantasize about changing my phone number and just moving away, just going somewhere else. I never go through with it, but sometimes we have this dramatic and intense need to do something different and to just blow up everything that we know or have known for a change. Nothing might be wrong exactly. Your job might be stable. You might feel like you have good friends, but there's just this nagging sense of feeling like you need to get out of like your current situation and something needs to change. And it's that like restless, almost suffocating feeling that something needs to give, this can't be it, and I need to change something right now, that we tend to have every now and then. Is this it? Is this just how my life is going to be day in, day out, doing the same things over and over again? This can't be it. The truth is, sometimes I think that voice might be right, and it's your intuition speaking, and you need to listen to it and make some changes. However, sometimes though, and this is what I've been learning, sometimes that voice is just a manifestation of discomfort with the ordinary and the mundane. And there's a big difference between genuinely actually needing to leave something or needing to leave a situation versus just being uncomfortable with the status quo, if that makes sense. So today I want to sort of dive into this idea of the art of staying, even when everything in you feels like you need to run, everything in you feels like you need to blow everything up and just change and transform your life. How do you know when restlessness is a sign that, yeah, something does need to change versus if it's an invitation to learn how to sit with discomfort? I think we need to start by acknowledging how seductive the impulse to run can actually be. Like I said, I've had like daydreams of just changing my number and like starting over in a new place where no one knows me and where no one can reach me. There is something intoxicating about a fresh start, a blank slate, a version of your life where it seems like you're not carrying any baggage or boredom or complicated feelings of your current situation. In your fantasy version, you're not tired, you're not jaded, you don't have any of the patterns or habits or relationship dynamics that feel sort of stale and unfulfilling in your current life. And you're just brand new, brand spanking new, you're better, you're more interesting, whatever the case may be. But I think what I'm noticing is that the specific impulse to just sort of blow things up usually occurs at certain points in my life. For me, it usually hits when, things are going fine and I'm suspicious that they won't last. When I am bored, and I've been sort of doing the same routine or the same things, and I've confused that boredom with the sense that I'm in the wrong place. When this also shows up for me when I'm avoiding dealing with something really difficult, and so leaving, whether literally or figuratively feels easier to do than the difficulty of tackling whatever it is that I'm avoiding head on. And I think most powerfully for me is when I see other people making big moves, and so my, life situation sort of, it just suddenly feels stagnant and uninspiring, and a sense of envy and jealousy just kind of crops up there as well. So I'm just gonna like break each of those down. So like I started off with it by saying that, sometimes we panic when we feel like something's too good to be true, and so it must be coming to an end. So like when things are stable, our brains may sometimes interpret that as the calm before the storm, and like if nothing's actively going wrong, then when is the other shoe going to drop? Something must be gearing up to just go catastrophically wrong. And so instead of enjoying the stability and the predictability and just life just being life and no chaos happening, I get anxious, or we tend to get anxious about that. And one way to deal with anxiety is to sort of blow things up preemptively, because when we do that, at least we are the cause of the chaos, and rather than waiting and being anxious when that chaos is going to happen, we just sort of make it happen. Makes complete and total sense, right? Another thing is about boredom being like a false signal. Boredom is like such an interesting emotion because we treat it like it means that there's something wrong. But really, boredom is neither good or bad. It's simply the absence of novelty, and our monkey brains really enjoy novelty. Our brains just like new and shiny things. So when life becomes predictable, you have the same job, the same apartment, the same weekend routine, whatever, your brain like starts sending you signals that this is boring. We need something stimulating. Let's do something dramatic. And for me lately, that has, for instance, I've been living in my place for like going on, yeah, 2 years now. And that's not a very long time, but I'm already feeling like, oh, it would be nice to start, looking at other places, to start, oh, like I'm like imagining myself and picturing myself in a different space. But it's like there's nothing wrong with this place that I'm living in. I think I'm just bored with it. I've reached a point where I'm stable in my space and I've settled in it, and so it just feels too familiar, and like my brain is seeking something new and shiny in regards to my living situation. But there's nothing wrong with it. So yeah, boredom doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the wrong place. I think usually it just means that you're in a stable place, and stability really can feel boring after a while. That's the honest truth, especially if you're the kind of person that's used to chaos or chasing the next thing. Now, avoidance disguised as change is a big one. Sometimes the urge to leave or to run away isn't about the situation you're in, it's about avoiding something that you don't want to deal with. Maybe it's a difficult conversation you need to have, maybe it's a pattern you keep repeating, maybe it's grief or disappointment, or even the gap between who you thought you would be by now and who you actually are. And running to a new city or a new job or a new relationship even won't solve any of those things. You just sort of bring them along with you. And then 6 months later, or however long later, you're in a new place and the same sense of restlessness crops up, and you start wondering why the fresh start that you managed to accomplish did not fix all those problems. And then there's the comparison trap through social media, my favorite thing to talk about. Um, watching other people do dramatic things like quitting their job, quitting their 9 to 5 to chase their dreams, move cities, move across the country, start over, reinvent, rebrand themselves. Um, it can be a little bit intoxicating to sort of see other people do that and wonder if that's something that you can do for yourself. And you suddenly start to feel like your steady life is evidence that you're not brave enough or interesting enough to live like fully, like all those other people on social media are doing. But like I always say, social media is really just a highlight It's what people choose to share about their lives at any given point. It's polished, even when even when I shouldn't say pretend, even when it's not polished. It's still a polished version of that person's reality. And what you're not seeing is you're not seeing a person who moved to a new city and can't make any friends, or who quit their job to pursue that passion, but now they're financially stressed. Or, the person that blew up their life and they're now having to address the fallout that comes from such a decision. You're seeing the announcement post, but you're not really seeing the reality, the behind the scenes of those decisions. So when the urge to run hits, I think the first thing to do is pause and ask yourself, okay, what am I really running from? So if the impulse to run isn't always a reliable signal, I think it begs the question of how do you know when you actually do need to make a change, when, yeah, a change is necessary? Because sometimes you do need to leave. Sometimes, staying in that job or in that relationship or in that friendship or whatever is the wrong choice. And then really truthfully, sometimes that restlessness is your intuition telling you that something is genuinely off and you need to listen to it. But the question is, how do you tell the difference? So this is how I feel like I've been learning to sort of tell the difference between I need to blow up my life versus I'm just uncomfortable with stability and where I'm at right now. First of all, when I get the urge to make a big and dramatic change, I just sort of give that feeling time. Not forever, I'm not talking about staying in something harmful or something entirely intolerable, but if it's not an emergency and if it's not like a matter of life or death, I sit with the feeling for a few weeks or even a couple of months. And I think this is why it's sort of important to sit with those feelings. So impulses can be loud and like urgent. They demand immediate action. It's like an itch you need to scratch. But with genuine misalignment, when your intuition is trying to tell you that something's off, it's sort of consistent. It doesn't like go away. It doesn't fluctuate with your mood or your sleep or what you saw on Instagram that day. And so if I'm still feeling the same way, if the restlessness really hasn't shifted, if I still can't articulate what I'd be given up by leaving, then that's data, that's like information. I think that's worth paying attention to. But if the feeling is volatile, if I'm fine some days, if the idea of like selling my condo and moving to a new place kind of comes and goes, ebbs and flows, one moment I feel strongly about it, and the next means like, yeah, I actually really love my place, then it's probably not about the situation. It's probably about something internal that I need to work through. Like I said, maybe boredom, and I just need to move around my furniture or something and make the space feel a bit more novel again, as an example. Very trivial example, maybe. Um, and then another thing to do is to interrogate the fantasy. And what I mean by that is when you imagine leaving, what does that fantasy actually look like? Try to be as specific as possible. Maybe you're fantasizing about, quitting your job. But when you interrogate that fantasy and get really honest with yourself, what you might realize is that you're not really fantasizing about a different job. Maybe what you're just fantasizing about is just having no job and having no responsibilities or obligations and having complete freedom. So no matter what job you change to, that restlessness will still come back. So yeah, that's not a career change, that's a desire to escape responsibility entirely, which if only. And it's fine to like feel that way sometimes, but it's really not actionable in this day and age unless you like, I don't know, want to be like, I don't know, marry someone rich or something. I don't know. Even then. But interrogating and being honest with that fantasy, what it tells you is that the restlessness is not really about, your job, that you're in that particular job. It's about something else entirely. Another question that can cut through the noise is asking what you'd actually be giving up if you left, if you uprooted your life, if you ran away, if you did the thing. So you're not leaning into the fantasy of what you're gaining. You're really questioning, okay, if I do this, what am I losing. If you're really thinking about quitting your job, maybe you write down what it is that you'd be losing if you did that. You'd lose financial stability, maybe health insurance, maybe relationships with coworkers that you genuinely like, maybe a routine that works for your mental health, or even like a flexibility that you've negotiated for. And then suddenly the decision to quit your job or whatever it may be gets a lot more complicated than just sort of doing the thing. Because in reflecting that way, you might realize that you're taking for granted a lot of, good things that comes with the stability or whatever it may be, in pursuit of some vague idea of something better, whatever that might look like in your fantasy. And this doesn't mean that you should never leave something good. Sometimes you outgrow good situations, but I think the point here is that you have to be um, reflective and be honest about the trade-offs of doing that. Then another question to ask is this a pattern? Have you felt this way before? If you did, what happened? If every time things get stable, and you get the urge to blow shit up, I think that's a pattern. That's information that you need to investigate. And patterns are about you and not your circumstances, because you're the common denominator in every single one of those situations, right? And at some point you have to ask, am I running from, these situations, or am I running from myself? In the words of Taylor Swift, is that how she said it? Am I the problem? I'm afraid I'm the problem. Whatever it is Taylor Swift said, are you the problem? Be honest with yourself and answer those questions. And another thing to consider is, really question whether you've actually tried to change things from within the situation, whatever it may be. If your job is boring, have you asked for new projects to excite you and to challenge you and to develop you further? If your relationships feel surface level, have you tried initiating deeper conversations? If you feel like you need to move to a new apartment, have you tried rearranging your current space first, to give it a shiny new apartment feel? Sometimes we are so focused on the exit that we don't explore whether the situation is actually fixable. And sometimes a small shift, whether a new mindset, a new habit, whatever, can really transform the whole thing. So let's say you've done the work, you've given it time, you've interrogated the fantasy, you've acknowledged what you lose, and you have determined that this restlessness isn't actually a sign to leave, it's just discomfort with where you are. So what do you do next? I think that because it's the hard part, you still feel restless and you still have to deal with that restlessness. You still wake up in the mornings wanting to escape, wanting to quit your job, whatever it might be, wanting to move to a new place, move to a new city. But you still have to choose to stay, even when staying feels hard. This is where the real unglamorous work kind of lies. Learning to sit with restlessness is one of the most underrated life skills, because we live in a culture that tells us discomfort is a problem to solve immediately. If you're bored, scroll. If you're anxious, shop. If you're restless, blow up your life. But what if restlessness is not a problem? What if it's just a feeling that passes through like any other feeling? And you kind of learn to sit with it. And so here's what I've been practicing in my life when I get these moments of restlessness where I feel like I need to do something dramatic. So sometimes when we feel restless, our brains immediately want to create a story. I'm restless because I'm in the wrong place, or I'm in the wrong stage of life, and I need to do this, and da 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 da, all the things we've been talking about. But what if we just didn't do that, but instead we just acknowledge that we're feeling restless today, and that's it? There doesn't need to be any action that follows. Just feel the feeling, acknowledge it, and just allow it to pass, like a lot of other like really difficult to deal with emotions. Another thing to do that I've sort of been alluding to is you can find small ways to create novelty. Like I said, sometimes restlessness just means that your brain needs stimulation, and you can do that without uprooting your entire life. Maybe take a different route to work, maybe try a new restaurant, maybe say yes to something slightly outside your comfort zone. Try reading a book in a genre you were like, you never thought you would, touch, you try to read. Novelty doesn't really have to be something dramatic. It's just a means to break patterns in small ways. And sometimes when I'm restless, it's because I forget the why. And I think this is like an important thing. You forget why you're working in a particular job, or why you're living in a particular house, or why you're dating the person you're dating. So I try to make myself remember. I look at old journal entries where I was excited about whatever stage of life it is that I'm in. And I sort of just try and remember what my life was like before. And this is where like having a consistent journaling practice has been such a game changer for me. And I think about the version of me however many years ago who dreamed of being this woman, right? And even though it doesn't make the restlessness go away 100%, it just sort of grounds me a little, and it reminds me that this life that I've got right now is a choice that I've made, is the result of hard work and persistence and dedication, and just so much work that I've done. And just keep choosing and just keep showing up even when things feel sort of meh. Here is what I've come to believe. In a culture that glorifies a dramatic exit or rebrand or whatever, I feel like staying is the radical choice. Staying when you're bored, staying when you're restless, staying when it would be easier to run. I think that takes an immense amount of courage, because it means you have to deal with yourself, right? It means you have to reflect and look inward. You have to confront the patterns that you would rather avoid. You have to sit with discomfort instead of distracting yourself by putting yourself in a new situation. And it also means that you're working to become the kind of person who can deal with the ordinary and the mundane that is really truly life, that you don't always need constant novelty or drama to feel stimulated or engaged. And you're becoming the kind of person who can find meaning in the remarkable and unglamorous sort of middle ground. And that can be hard to do, honestly. So, because the thing about running is you can keep doing it forever. There will always be somewhere new to go, some exciting new things to chase. But then what? And at some point, you're going to have to stop and ask, what am I actually looking for? And is this something that I can find, like where I'm at right now? And again, this is not me saying that you should stay in situations that are harmful or intolerable and that you should never change. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. But before you do, quote unquote, run, make sure you're running toward something, some purpose, and not just because you're avoiding discomfort or boredom. So this is where I'm landing with all of this. The urge to blow everything up and start over is probably always going to be a thing. I mean, we suffer midlife crises because of, I think, this particular phenomenon. But I think the point is to be able to get better at recognizing what it is, and understanding that it's not a sign that you're in the wrong place, but just a sign that you're a human, that we get bored, we crave novelty, and that we're, uncomfortable with the ordinary. And you can feel all of that without necessarily acting on it, right? You can sit with the restlessness, you can acknowledge it, you can give it the space that it needs and deserves. And then you choose to stay anyway. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I really truly appreciate you. You can follow me on my social platforms. I'll have everything linked in the show notes, and also the YouTube channel for the podcast, so you can watch the video version of the episode. But yeah, thank you all so much. I had fun reflecting on this topic and sharing my thoughts with you all. That's all I have to share for today in this episode, and I will see you next time in another one. Until then, take care and goodbye.